team or something like that. Friends, in my 38 years as a rabbi, I have preached on our Torah portion Korach, well, probably over a dozen times. And since it is quite a difficult portion, for inspiration, I decided to look back to see what I had written in the past. And I must say that over the years, I have offered just about every possible interpretation imaginable. In one sermon, I opined that Korach's rebellion was completely righteous. In another, that it was wholly unjustified. When I was still the youth group rabbi, I likened Korach's rebellion to the adolescent rebellion of our teenagers. As a young parent, struggling with setting consequences for my own children, I wrote that Korach may have been wrong for rebelling, but the punishment was way out of proportion to the crime. Alas, that exercise did not really help much. So turning from my own exegesis, I proceeded to that of the rabbis, specifically to an interpretation I found in a collection of midrashim known as Midrash Tanchuma. It begins with the opening words of the Torah portion, Vayikach Korach. What does "and Korach took" mean, the Midrash asks? Well, Korach took what is written in Numbers 15:38, speak unto the children of Israel and tell them to make tzitzit for themselves, out of context, and challenged Moses by using it against him. How? Korach confronts the great lawgiver with the question, in the case of a talit which is all blue, what is the rule about it being exempt from having the requirement to affix tzitzit, or tassels? Moses responded, such a prayer shawl is required to have tzitzit. But Korach countered, would not a prayer shawl which is all blue be exempt from that requirement, since the Torah you say you got directly from God declares that when only 4 blue threads are in a garment, it is exempt. And in my mind's eye, I see Moses just stammering in response. Then Korach pounces again, asking, in the case of a house which has within it a Bible, what is the rule about it being exempt from having a mezuzah? Moses responded, even a house filled with Bibles is required to have a mezuzah. But Korach said, springing his rhetorical trap, since the whole Torah has 275 parshiot or verses, and you now claim that they do not exempt the house from having a mezuzah, how can the 2 verses in the mezuzah itself exempt the house? Moses must have looked stunned. Aha, Korach exclaimed in triumph. These are things about which you have not been commanded by God at all. You're just making them up out of your own head. Well, given that I had begun my research last week, I must admit that I found myself flabbergasted. For although I took this passage from a 500-year-old text, I could swear that it was actually a transcript of last week's presidential debate. Now, because of the Johnson Amendment and its prescription of rabbis, cantors, or clergy speaking about politics on the bima during an election cycle, I will not speak about politics this evening. I will, however, speak about speaking about politics. Because although July 4th is now behind us on the calendar, I know that there are many backyard barbecues planned to celebrate this holiday this weekend. And after a few beers, someone is bound to bring up the most recent debate between our nation's 2 candidates for president. Thus, this July 4th could become less of an Independence Day and more of a civil war, except with hamburgers and hot dogs. The main point of this midrash, you see, is that Korach's sin, the sin that caused he and his supporters to be swallowed up by the earth, was the way he went about his discourse. It was the rabbi's prime example of how not to have a political discussion. So, how does one approach such loaded situations? Recently, I have come to believe that people underestimate the value of simple, pleasant time spent together. Having grown up in a home where freewheeling debate was around the dinner table was central to our family ethos, I did not come to this insight easily. Still, I shared it recently with a young man who came to see me because he was constantly butting head with his parents around political and social issues. His incredulous response was, "So, Rabbi, what you are telling me is that I should be fake, conceal my true ideas and feelings, that my family should be superficial with one another." I smiled sadly and responded, "Yes, that is exactly what I am saying." Many years ago, I counseled two brothers whose family business fell apart with many recriminations on both sides. Family simchas were ruined. Seders and Thanksgiving meals rendered unbearable for everyone present, including the elderly parents. After listening to both sides, I asked, "Is there anything you two can do together without quarreling?" "Well," one brother answered sheepishly, "we still do play a nice round of golf together." And so I had them arrange every Wednesday morning a brotherly round of golf at a local country club. Discussions of both politics and business were disallowed. Recently, many years later, I saw one of the brothers at a wedding and asked how things were going. As it turns out, that weekly golf game has been going on for more than a decade now. Although they are still not best of friends, the family is able to relax when they are in the same room together. Pleasant time spent together. It is truly an underappreciated blessing. Now, one problem with political discourse recently is that it has become a team sport, more of a war, really. Anyone on the other side is the enemy, inhuman even. You can hear this dehumanizing language all around us on social media, at protests, even coming out of the mouths of our national leaders. So, one strategy to cut through the alienation is to recognize that few of the platforms of either team are based on coherent political philosophy. Otherwise, how could the party of Lincoln stand opposed to civil rights legislation and the left wing of the supposedly liberal party oppose the only nation in the Middle East that protects the rights of the LGBTQ community, women, and minorities? So, my advice for respectful and intelligent political discourse: if you must talk politics, focus on specific issues and consider each on its own merits based on your own personal, philosophical, and ethical yardstick. Separate them out from whatever your team dictates you must think about it. The concept of intersectionality, that we must agree on every issue if we want to be part of the team, will surely turn us into intellectual automatons. All issues are not connected. One can have different feelings about different matters. It is called discernment. Finally, I would suggest that one way to soften political differences around the barbecue pit this 4th of July weekend is to recognize one's own limitations when it comes to deciphering fact from fiction in these modern times. In this new age of internet misinformation, psychological manipulation, algorithmic sophistication, we have all been rendered somewhat naive and even gullible. You were not trained in high school or college to sift out disinformation generated by Russian bots. I was not. No one was. Our young people are particularly vulnerable, for instance, to the anti-Israel messaging of TikTok as manipulated by the government of China. Thus, no one, no matter how intelligent, is immune from being duped into spreading such false information out into the world. Oh, I do implore my friends who send me truly absurd and histrionic news stories to at least fact-check the site by using sites like Snopes.com before forwarding on those ridiculous emails. But truly, we should all come to those barbecues armed with just a touch of humility. What you are arguing vociferously may be based on a purposely placed digital lie. Even the best of us are not immune. So, remembering that this holiday is a celebration of the greatest experiment in democracy ever endeavored and ever achieved, come to this July 4th weekend with an abiding appreciation for the power of pleasant time spent together with family and friends, no matter how deep the disagreements may run. Come to this 4th of July weekend with a sense of true discernment based on issues and ethics, not teams. And perhaps most importantly, we should all come to this July 4th weekend with just a touch of rhetorical humility, lest, like Korach, the ground beneath us fall away and the gaping abyss of misunderstanding and alienation destroy the very things that we cherish most. For that, my friends, is what true independence, intellectual, spiritual, political independence is really all about. Shabbat Shalom, and may God bless America.